I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello horror hounds, welcome to my horror house. After the last video looking at The Changeling, I wanted to stick with classic ghost stories. Thought it was a perfect opportunity to fill a gap in my viewing knowledge. That's right, up until a few days ago I had never seen Jack Clayton's The Innocents. Now we've all got gaps in our horror movie history, movies that we haven't seen, huge movies that we haven't seen. If you want to treat the comment section as a confessional and confess to big movies that you haven't quite got round to seeing yet, please do, because I'm here to say, hello, my name's Andrew, I'm a horror fan, and up until a few days ago I hadn't seen The Innocents. And now I wish I'd seen it sooner. I wish I'd seen it when I was younger and more impressionable, because it would have probably scared the bejesus out of me. As it is, through no fault but my own, by the time now I finally got round to it, I'd already seen stills, I'd seen excerpts, I'd seen Peter Wyngarde at the window, I'd seen Miss Jessel across the lake. I had, in essence, spoiled the opportunity for the movie to scare me or chill me, but boy, did it impress me. The Innocents is an adaptation of a play which itself is an adaptation of Henry James' novella The Turn of the Screw. We looked at The Turn of the Screw when I was at university, and all I can truly remember about it is the interminable sentences, the length of paragraphs, and this almost conjuring trick of ambiguity that James plays with the notion of, are there ghosts, or is our protagonist coming a bit frayed at the edges? The story deals with a governess named Miss Giddens in the play, and now the film The Innocents. Miss Giddens takes a job to go to the country, a big manor estate, and essentially be the governess in charge of two young orphaned children, and take over the running of the household, really, at the behest of the children's rich bachelor uncle, who really can't be doing with all those bothersome details and family and children. He wants to live his life of luxury and enjoyment in London. He just wants someone else to take care of all that, and don't bother me please, no matter what. Does he not want to be bothered because he knows there are supernatural goings on there? Certainly there have been a couple of deaths in the past before Miss Giddens arrived. Miss Jessel, the previous governess, died, as did the sort of handyman around the estate, Peter Quint. At the heart of this story is the question, are the ghosts of Quint and Jessel back to try and contaminate and possess the children, or is the impressionable Miss Giddens letting her imagination and her own repressed anxieties, worries and perhaps psychoses get away with her in this strange new environment? You may ask yourself, how can you transpose ambiguity in prose and a novella into a film where you actually have to show some stuff going on? You could do worse, I would argue, than get Truman Capote to help write your script. Apparently Capote took previous drafts and stripped out flashbacks galore, everything referring to the human lives of Quint and Miss Jessel, in order to have them be, within the framework of the film, an idea, a notion of these people who existed. That instinct was absolutely spot on. He thought that if we saw scenes with these characters alive, they would be too fixed in our mind when we saw them, or perhaps saw them later on as apparitions or hallucinations. We would tie them to these real people that we've been shown. Without that, the only reference we've got really to Quint and Jessel are what Miss Giddens is told, and then what she either intuits or makes up. So you have a wonderful classic setup for a ghost story. You have a governess, you have two young children, you have a manor estate with a past that the housekeeper, Mrs. Gross, will sort of allude to and winkle out little bits of information that just enough to keep Miss Giddens baited. Not on purpose, not maliciously, but just breadcrumbs enough to keep her following a path until she either hits upon the truth of the situation or just veers radically off course and spirals out of control in her own mind. One of the things I do remember from Henry James's novella, and it was many years ago, was that I think I'd pretty much come down on the side that there were ghosts. Watching The Innocents, and especially Deborah Kerr's performance as Miss Giddens, my first takeaway from my first ever viewing of it is, boy, she's completely wackadoodle. I mean, she is nuts. You can see it in her eyes at the start, these little ticks and things. I saw a review very astutely mapping The Innocents onto Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Both begin with a job interview. Both begin with a character who may be a little bit flighty to begin with. Both go to remote locations with children and start to see things. And are those things real, or are they part of our protagonist's mental and psychological degradation in these new oppressive environs? One of the things I've loved about The Innocents, loved, is that since seeing it, I've been playing it back over in my mind. I've been reading other reviews about it, checking out clips again, and thinking that seriously, next time I watch it, I may go the other way and think, no, Miss Giddens is onto something. There's definitely something supernatural going on. There's enough pieces on both sides of the argument that you could stack up all these stones and say, look, this is definitely supernatural, and you could stack up all these stones and say, no, this is definitely in Miss Giddens' head. And the pile of stones is going to be fairly equal, I believe. So at the centre of it, then you have Miss Giddens, Deborah Kerr. The camera is almost always on her face. She is almost always ranging around, looking for something, observing, looking for signs that her instincts are right. The camera is on her when she sees things. The ghosts never appear, but without us seeing her see them first. Her face first, her reaction, then we see what she sees or thinks she sees. It's a meticulous performance. Really charismatic, mesmeric. I could not take my eyes off that woman's face. I would actually say, while we're talking about The Innocents versus The Shining as well, it's a far more nuanced performance with a hell of a lot more subtlety than Jack Nicholson gives us in The Shining. Deborah Kerr, from the very first time the film fades up on her face to it fading down on her at the end of the movie, sort of takes this thread and guides us meticulously through this story, offering us with each expression, each tick, each reaction, each thought that passes through her mind, the possibility that these supernatural things are happening, and at the same time that this is perhaps all going on in her mind. I would say this is a Mount Everest of a performance compared to, as much as I love it, Jack Nicholson's showboating in The Shining. If you're going to have kids in your ghost story, that's potentially going to be a weak link in the chain, and there is no weak link here. The two children, Flora and Miles, I think, I was going to say they're suitably creepy, but they're kind of, if you want to see it, there's creepiness there. Let's talk about Flora, who is played by Pamela Franklin, and it was her first ever screen performance, according to some of the documentaries I've seen afterwards. She wasn't even really told the whole script, didn't really know the nastiness that was surrounding what was going on in the scenes that she was asked to do. So she just did what director Jack Clayton asked her to do. He wanted a child being a child, and that's what you get. It affords us this wonderful opportunity, if we want as an adult, to map adult concerns onto that performance, which is possibly what Miss Giddens is doing within the movie. Her brother Miles is played by Martin Stevens, who had by that point racked up screen time, not least being one of the genuinely creepy kids in Village of the Damned. So playing with Flora's potentially contaminated innocence is Miles's seemingly adult soul within a very young child's body. Is this a sign of a boy who's had to grow up too fast because of circumstance, a young boy orphaned, or is this the sign of a malignant older spirit invading and trying to corrupt and guide a young mind? It leads to some really creepy moments when Flora sees something out of her window, or does she, and her expression changes. We never get the reverse angle on what she's looking at in the garden, all left up to her imagination. Most disturbing of all are two kisses between Miles and Miss Giddens, which really cements a deeply queasy and uneasy subtext of child abuse and potential child abuse going on in here that is a lot spikier and nastier than the similar subtext in The Shining. I guess maybe I'm talking myself into thinking as I'm blabbering on that The Innocents is a better ghost story than The Shining, and I think I'm good with that. When the ghosts appear here, if they do appear, I love how the sound dips out, how they appear in silence, diametrically opposed to what James Wan does with his Conjuring universe and movies like Insidious, where ghosts are suddenly there and there's a big, especially in the Insidious movies, a huge scare chord. The absolute opposite. The sound drops out and then the ghosts either glide up to a window pane or in the eeriest shot of them all, Miss Jessel across the lake who seems solid, and then we see Miss Giddens speak and then back again, and this time it's more from a viewpoint of Miss Giddens and Flora, who says she can't see anything. And Miss Jessel seems to have faded somewhat. You find yourself squinting and looking, leaning forward, going, is she still there? Just an absolute masterclass. Jack Clayton as director was certainly captain of this ship. So steady at the helm. Slow and steady wins the race for The Innocents. No grandstanding, no flash bang boom, just a slow creeping sense of something being not quite right. A film so assured that you have, I guess you would call it a set piece of Deborah Kerr with a candelabra wandering through the building at night, overlaying sounds and images, lots of cross-fading from one scene to another, sort of sandwiching it in with almost a little collage effect. We'll fade from one scene to another, and briefly in the middle we'll focus on a rose, and then the rose will pull out, and then we'll be out in the garden, making the surroundings and everything seem ghostly and ephemeral. I don't often talk about cinematographers, but Freddie Francis here works absolute wonders. It's a crime that he never got an award for his work on The Innocents. Filmed in CinemaScope, he gave a depth of field to this film that there were sequences that felt like I was watching the film in 3D. So yes, I have finally got round to seeing The Innocents. What films do you need to get round to watching that you know, sort of niggling in the back of your head, I really should watch this one? I'm going to stick with Jack Clayton next, because it will allow me to move into an area of films that I wanted to dip my toe in on this channel for a little while, that I think of in my mind a very strange period in this production company's history. A little bit of dark Disney.